faked my death. Or at least that was the plan. And the plan was perfect. Clean. Untraceable. Right up until the moment a man reached into a lake and pulled me out of it with the grip of someone who had already decided I belonged to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Baek Seorim. And before you understand what I became, you need to understand what I lost, because everything that followed, every terrible and magnificent and ruinous thing, began with a text message at 6:47 p.m. and a phone call at 7:23 p.m. 36 minutes. In 36 minutes, my mother went from planning spinach for dinner to being covered by a white cloth in a hospital corridor. In 36 minutes, the only person in the world who had ever looked at me without calculating my value simply stopped existing. I was 19. I had no one. And grief, I discovered, is not the loud, devastating thing people describe. It is quiet. It is the funeral parlor too warm in summer, incense burning down to ash, strangers debating whether your mother's death was an accident or something else while you sit 3 feet away searching for a missing floor cushion because your mind needs something small and findable to hold on to. It is a portrait of a woman in a yellow cardigan smiling with her eyes curved like crescent moons, and knowing with complete certainty that she was planning spinach, and not being able to make those two facts exist in the same world. Then the man with the gold tooth arrived. He came to the funeral on the 3rd day, moving through the incense smoke with 3 other suits behind him, and he bowed at the portrait with practiced ease, and then he turned and found me immediately the way eyes always found me in a room, for reasons I had learned too young and too late to change. He held out his hand. "You're Baek Hong-sik's son, right?" My father's name. The name that had been an unspoken taboo in our house since I was small. The name that made my mother's face shudder closed like a window against winter. I stared at the hand. It was a wide hand, thick-fingered, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with size. I should have pulled away. I was 19 and my mother was 3 days dead and I had no one else in the world. I took the hand. 3 months later, in an apartment those men had been paying for, which should have been the first sign. I sat at a kitchen table that wasn't my table and read a number on a page that ended my life as I understood it. My father, Baek Hong-sik, had borrowed money. A great deal of money. From men with gold teeth and heavy hands. And then, with the skill he had apparently been practicing since before I was born, he had vanished completely, leaving behind a son and a debt in that order. "Family obligation," the gold-toothed man said, sitting across from me with his hands open on the table like a book already turned to the relevant page. "That's just how it works." I looked at the wall behind his head. Neutral beige. I had always hated neutral beige. "I don't have money," I said. "We know," he said, not unkindly. That was almost worse. "But you have other things." That was how Madame Zhang entered my life. She was small, precise, silver-streaked, and she spoke about human transactions the way other people spoke about weather, descriptively, without judgment, with the simple understanding that conditions exist and one adapts. She told me about a wealthy man outside Seoul. Old money, large property. She said I would be comfortable. "And the debt?" I asked. "Settled. Fully." When I asked what the alternative was, she looked at me for a long moment across pale curtains and delicate teacups and said absolutely nothing. So I made my decision. I would go. I would perform. I would become whatever the white dress shirt and lowered eyes and soft voice needed me to be. And then, when the time was right, when the schedules aligned and the lake was unobserved and the trail was clean, I would disappear. Completely. Permanently. No body required. Just clothes on a pier, dark water, and a story that wrote itself. I had researched it in the quiet hours before dawn. I had a plan, and the plan made the unbearable feel temporary. I was wrong about so many things. The mansion appeared at the end of a long drive the way old things appear. Gradually, insistently, as though it had always been there and the road had grown toward it. Enormous. Western style. Preserved past its natural lifespan with moss on the pond walls and ivy trained deliberately up the stone. The whole property embalmed rather than maintained, radiating the particular heaviness of something kept alive by stubbornness alone. I stepped out of the black car with my single bag and looked at the stone facade and thought, this is a very good place to disappear from. The chairman looked at me across the dinner table that first evening the way he looked at everything he owned, with the flat assessment of inventory. I sat straight. I smiled with only my mouth. I answered questions correctly and briefly and said nothing that wasn't required. Inside, I was counting days. I found the backyard on my third morning, the unglamorous side, the part the architects hadn't bothered with. Weeds between pebbles, gray stone, the smell of old cigarette smoke and engine oil. Nobody went there. I went every day. It was the only place in that entire suffocating house where I could exist as myself, or whatever was left of myself after months of becoming someone else's. Where I could crouch in the dirt and look at weeds and let my pheromone shimmer drift without suppressing it, and feel, for a few minutes, like a person rather than a possession. I was there on a Thursday in late July when I heard footsteps. I kept my gaze down. The world often moves on if you give it nothing to catch on. The world did not move on. You should manage your pheromones, a voice said, low, unhurried, threaded with the specific amusement of someone who has decided to find you interesting. Unless you plan on spreading your legs for just anyone. I looked up. He was tall, lean, dark eyes under heavier brows with a cigarette between long veined fingers and one corner of his mouth doing something that lived near a smile without committing to it. He looked at me the way predators look at things that have gone still, not with suspicion, with interest, the kind that doesn't ask permission. I told him he looked like he had nothing better to do. He seemed genuinely, completely delighted by this. I stood up, brushed my shorts, and walked away without looking back, feeling the weight of his attention on my spine all the way to the door, like sunlight through glass. Directional, warm, entirely capable of burning. I learned his name that afternoon from the servants' careful silences. Ryu Yeonho, the chairman's eldest son, returned from overseas on vacation. His room was directly above mine. I told myself I had one more week. One more week and the plan would be clean and I would be gone and none of this would matter. Then the chairman called me to his study. He spread photographs across the dark desk between us. My mother, her car, a mountain road with a broken guardrail at the edge of a cliff. Bank accounts with deposits traced through channels I didn't fully understand but felt immediately, the way you feel something before your mind catches up to what it means. The accident wasn't an accident. Arrangements had been made. People had been paid. I had been kept from knowing this because my not knowing was useful. It kept me compliant, kept me performing, kept me sitting across dinner tables with practiced smiles while the man who had orchestrated my mother's death watched me over a roasted chicken. He told me this with his hands folded on the desk, in the tone of a man settling an account. I walked back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were not shaking, which surprised me. I thought about the text message. Spinach tonight, 6:47 p.m. And then I walked to the lake.